So we received a request from a student whose class we're supporting this semester on how you might recreate an effect kind of like this one where they're sort of animating in this mat underneath a series of text, which is then animating up into place. It really is a dynamic look, and then also how you might highlight and use these highlight functions. And basically these are going to be utilizing sort of After Effects as more simple, if like a fair number of these different tools. So I'm going to run through it pretty quickly, but feel free to stop and rewind and sort of like, play one bit back a few times over. So I'm starting off with an empty composition, and I found an article on which universities are going to be opening again in the fall. And I just took a screenshot and brought it in, and what I want to do is scale that up so that it sits well within the parameters of that composition. And then from there, and sometimes it's even nice if it like doesn't make too much sense, like if it just, this would not be a nice shot if we were not blurring it out, but since we're blurring it out and putting something over top of it, it should be fine. So what we're going to do is we're scale that up, position it so that it sort of looks like vaguely abstract in the background, and then we're just going to go up here and search blur. In this case, I'm going to be using a Gaussian blur. It is considered to be a legacy, but it is a dead simple, dead easy tool to use that just straight up blurs things out, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So that's what I'll do. So now that we have that in place, what we can do now is start to drop our text in over top of this. And that's just going to be utilizing the text function. I went over here into my scene, and I'm just going to copy, the first half of this sentence. And so we'll have two separate, forms of the sentence in the scene. I'm just going to paste that in, and then just drag this back over so that it's roughly about the right size. If this is too big or too small or just not a good font, when you have this selected, you can scale these up or down, change all kinds of options, including your kerning and your how tall or wide it is. But I'm happy with what we have there. So I'm just going to grab the other half of the sentence, drop it in here using the text tool. And clearly I made a mistake. So I just want these two to match up, which means that I want to change this font to 71. And so that should be good. So I'll situate those around this point here. It's kind of nice if they're above the center just by a little bit in sort of the upper 2/3 of the screen, and then with a little bit of space between them. And that seems good to me. Maybe even a little bit more space. That's nice. And then from here, I'm just going to animate these. They're really, really, really simple. I just want to make sure that these are lined up, and I can even just drop a guide in order to check that and just see if they line up somewhat naturally, and they don't. So I'm going to bump that one over. That seems good. And then from there, I can just drop the guide out. So the animation for these is going to be a really, really, really simple, maybe 4 to 8 frame animation in which the opacity and the position sort of fade in and move up in the same move. So I'm going to drop opacity and position data where I want them to be, and then I'm going to apply new position data down here and just lower it by roughly 3/4 to 1 full line below it, and drop the opacity to 0. I'm going to do the same thing down here. So I go to my 8 frames in, set my position and my opacity, drag it to the very beginning, and then move it down by roughly 1 line and drop that opacity to 0. And when I play it back, it should move, yeah, in pretty decent tandem. I kind of like it sometimes when they're off by a little bit, like one travels not as far as the other one, because it gives a nice little fading up effect of the entire thing. So that should be good. And then the next thing that we're going to need is 2 rectangles to go behind these. And so I'm going to leave this drop down, but sort of collapsed just so I can see where my, my keyframes are. And I'm going to drop another shape layer in here. So, and I need my shape layer to be behind them. And then from there, I can just select my rectangle tool and create a rectangle behind there. And that's pretty good. Now the last thing that I'm going to want here is to drop down my contents and duplicate this rectangle and then drag it down here so that they're identical in size, which is important, and in position. So this one is a little bit long, so I'm going to shorten it up and then drag it over and extend it out. And I want that little bit of sliver between them for aesthetic reasons. So let's position this over and up a little bit. There we go. We have our little sliver between them. It's looking pretty good. I might even bump that over by a tiny bit again to the right so that they align better. And so there we go. This is not very scientific. You can get really scientific with it, but just for the sake of showing today, I just wanted to show this. So the next thing that we want to apply is what's called a track mat. And basically a track mat is a brand new shape layer that is laid down underneath of my existing shape layer. And what it's going to do is determine the parameters with which the shape layer can be seen while on screen. And this is going to let us sort of animate that effect of them sliding in. And so I want to line it up with the most important part being that it's larger than the shape layer that I'm using, and it's aligning where this line is really the most important part of it. So from there, I can just go down to none, and if you don't see this, you can click this button to reveal this normal none track mat option, and then alpha mat. I'm sorry, I want my shape layer to be below shape layer 1 there, and alpha mat shape layer 1. And so when I click that, you'll see it becomes empty. Mysterious, right? So from here, all I have to do is set my position data here. Oh, I'm sorry. Set my position data at 8 frames. And then go back to the very beginning and grab my x-axis and drag them over. And as you can see, as I'm dragging them, it makes them disappear entirely. So now when I play it back, they'll kind of swoop in into these rising text and give this nice dynamic look. It can be a little bit nicer if you, instead of doing one position data for both of them, you drop these down and you go into rectangle and you set your position data independently, and that way they swoop in as 2 separate options, and that can be a little bit more dynamic, but in the spirit of sort of speed, I'm just going to do it as that. And then the final thing that we want to do is recreate this effect of having this yellow highlighter effect that sort of just swoops in order to highlight those options. So I'm going to move slightly farther down, and I'm really just going to do the exact same thing where I start off with a shape layer, go down to shape layer, and I want my shape layer to be below the text but above my other shape layers. And so I'm going to start off with my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to say I want to highlight improvement. And so I want it to be the exact same size, but most importantly, I want it to be accurate to the same size. So I'm just going to do this. And if you've set it down already and it's not allowing you, like if I just dragged another one, it would create another box. What you can do is hold down Command, and it'll give you like a arrow tool that you can drag this around to make this exactly what you want it to be. And it's going to be a little bit annoying in the sense that it's rotating around an anchor point. So as you do this, it's going to adjust all of them at once. So that's good-ish. There we go. Perfect. And then I can change this shape layer by dropping that down and going to fill and changing that over to my yellow highlighter. Make it a nice sort of orangey, brightish yellow, maybe a little more pastel. There we go. And so from here, we're just going to apply another track matte. So if I shift / go back to the larger set, collapse this down, and actually, even if I wanted to, I could, since I already know where this is beginning and ending, I can apply my transform keyframes. So I can go position here, drag backwards a little bit, and then drag over my X to just before where improvement might start, just like that. And so it'll slide into place. And then once you bring in your track matte as another layer, shape layer, and that's going to be shape layer 4, and we need it to be below 3 because 3 is this box up here. And so I can say below 3, and I want this line to line up perfectly with that line. And then I'm going to go to none and say alpha matte shape layer 3. Yes, this is one last thing that's a little bit strange, where it is in line with all the things underneath it. So in order to make this yellow, like I just did mistakenly, I need to go into my alpha matte shape layer, drop down fill, and then change the fill in here, not in the object above. So this is the one that carries the color data. But now when I play this back, it should swoop right in. And so now we get that nice little highlighting action.